Yeah. So, Jonathan, are we a little bit? Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, you're just cutting out just a hair there, but gotcha, I think.
So, I guess Caleb and I were both huge fans of you growing up, all the Michigan Chillers and American Chillers books.
Cool.
And so I had a question for you. So I know in 2000, if this is correct, you published your first 7 books of the Michigan Chillers.
Yeah, that is, I think 7. Yeah, I think it was 7 books in 2000. Yes.
Okay. And were these the first books you published?
No, actually, I had started writing adult fiction first. I wrote a book tentatively called The Laurentian Channel. It was like a murder mystery, kind of a shipwreck dive novel that was based in the Straits of Mackinac. That was picked up by a publisher, and while I was kind of waiting and watching everything that was going on behind the scenes, I had a couple more ideas. And so I published a book in 1997 called St. Helene, and it was an audiobook only, available on cassette. It was 2 cassettes. It was about maybe 3 hours long. And it did really well regionally. And in 1998, yeah, 1998. No, I'm sorry. That came out in 98. And then I published the trade paperback of that in 1999, along with another book called Ferocity, which is another adult fiction about a giant muskellunge that lives in a freshwater lake and eats people. So, but it was while I was writing that book that I got the idea for the Michigan Chillers in the summer of 1999.
Okay, so I got to ask you, looking at your background here, it seems like you have that kind of natural pull towards thrillers and those suspenseful kind of books.
Yeah.
That's good. So I guess my next question was, what inspired the Michigan/American Chillers? But you kind of answered that, but you can go deeper if you want.
Yeah, sure. Kind of, well, I grew up loving to read. I started reading at a relatively early age. My parents read to me, so I was fascinated with stories. And my kindergarten teacher, same thing. She read. That was my favorite part, really, of the day. And so when I learned to read on my own, I was just kind of off, and I started reading anything I could get my hands on. In fact, I would go home and my parents read, and I would see them reading. They read for pleasure, so they were reading, fiction and such. And I would go home and I would find like a book that my dad was reading, and I would sit into his chair and I'd flip it open, and I couldn't read. I mean, I didn't know what that was, all these little tiny, print. But I would recite like Clifford the Big Red Dog out loud, pretending that I was reading my dad's book, because I just thought, that's what grown-ups do. They read books, and I wanted to be like Dad. I wanted to be kind of grown up, and I started when I read books like I think a lot of the classics that kids still read today. Where the Wild Things Are, Curious George, and things like that. But I started gravitating towards a lot of the, compilations of short, scary stories. I loved ghost stories, anything that, would scare me silly. I was the kid that would, and like, I don't know how many millions of others would, hide the flashlight and the book underneath their pillow and pull the covers up over their head and, scare themselves silly. And I did that endlessly. But I think a book that really changed, everything for me when it came to reading, and maybe it was a little late to realize this, but between my 4th and 5th grade year of school, we moved north. We lived in Pontiac at the time, and then we moved to Grayling, and I had just acres and acres of woods. We didn't have any neighbors. I had the Ausable River out my front door, and I read a book called My Side of the Mountain by Gene George, which was obviously a Newbery winner. And I devoured that book over and over again that summer. But it was that book that it really occurred to me that whenever I sat on the banks of the river and I would read this book, I was no longer in Grayling, Michigan, or Crawford County, Michigan. I was transported to the Catskill Mountains of New York. And it hit me at that time that, if I do this with, My Side of the Mountain, this is what I'm doing when I read, Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, or, any of these other books in the library. They were transporting me and taking me to those places. And it just seemed amazing to me at that time that I could just go to all these, different places by opening up the pages of a book. And I continued, at that point, right at my 6th grade year, my reading changed a lot because I discovered a lot of the science fiction grandmasters like Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. And so I went into this science fiction craze for probably the next 3 years or so. And then I started picking up stuff, I think I can't remember I think it might have been Stephen King's first book, Carrie, that I read. And I just loved that. And I loved his style of writing. And I was pretty much hooked on scary stuff and horror stuff, after that. But while I was writing Ferocity in 1998, 1999, I wanted to come up with a metaphor. The story takes place in the fictitious town of Courville. And it's set on the very real lake, Mullet Lake, which is where we live. My wife and I live in Topanabee in northern Michigan. But with Courville, I wanted to kind of compare it to a beverage. Like if you took all the clean water and the beautiful surroundings, the lakes and everything, and you put it in a bottle and you sold it as a drink, what would you call it? And the name I settled on for the drink in the book is called a Courville Cooler. But I jotted down all these names that I thought I could use, and one of those names that I came up with was called a Michigan Chiller. And I immediately thought, well, that's kind of cool. It kind of sounds like a series of kids books. And I think it was probably maybe midsummer, late summer. I'd gone through, I got a bunch of boxes of my old books. I was going through some of them that I'd saved from when I was growing up and on into the future, some of the Goosebumps books but especially a lot of like the old Alfred Hitchcock scary compilations. But this idea of the Michigan Chillers just wouldn't leave me. And I kept thinking, this could be really cool. I could base the stories in different towns around the state. And then, if kids like that, I could, turn it into the American Chillers, and one thing led to another, and that's how the whole thing got started.
It all came true. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So would you say at a young age then you knew that writing or reading was your passion?
I would say it was a passion, but it wasn't a career choice. It wasn't a real direction that I was going to pursue. I always respected authors, and I just thought, and I love to write stories. I wrote stories, always crazy stuff, Bigfoot, attacking the town and Martians invading and things like that. And I was just doing it mostly for pleasure. It wasn't like anything that I read or I wrote and then I would take it and give it to anybody. A lot of them I just saved. And I wanted to go into natural resources technology, and that's what I started college for. Boy, what a week that was. And because that didn't last very long. I did not apply myself in my collegiate studies. But as the money began to dwindle and I started thinking, I better do something. There was a local FM radio station that was looking for somebody to be on the radio. And I'd never done anything like it before, but I just thought it'd be such a cool job, to get paid to play music. And even my friends at college, my roommate was like, you can't do that. You don't, know what you're doing. You've never done that before. And I got to try. So I went in and Bob Greenwood was the program director at the time. And there's a couple reasons why he hired me. Number one, I was really persistent. I kept calling him all the time. But the two big reasons that he mentioned later was the fact that I could read well and I could write well. So I was 18 years old, and he said that I had the skills of someone who had already gone to college. And I think, obviously at the time I had a lot to learn, but I think a lot of those skills had developed because I was such a voracious reader.
Right.
I did a lot of writing. Whenever I was reading something by, let's take Ray Bradbury, for instance. And if I was writing my own short stories, my writing was reflective of what Ray Bradbury, very, very Byzantine and very, very wordy and colorful. So I kind of developed my own writer's voice through those years of school. But I never really had any plans of writing books or doing anything for a living. It just kind of fell into my lap. And then at the radio station, that was one thing that I really loved to do. It was fun to be on the radio, and I loved, getting free tickets to concerts and going backstage and meeting all these famous rock stars. But my real love was sitting alone in the production studio and writing radio commercials and producing them. And I would do that for hours. In fact, I would come in there on my days off, and my boss would tell me, he'd look at the calendar on the wall, and look at his watch, and he's like, "You're not supposed to be here. I can't pay you for this." And I'm like, "I know, I don't care. I'm just having fun. I'm working on some ideas for a commercial or whatever." And obviously then I was hired. They hired me full time, and I wound up making a pretty good living. I built a studio in my home and voiced and wrote these commercials and shipped them out all across the country for a number of years.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was in radio when you came up with the alias Christopher Knight.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Because I was on the radio at WQON, my first job. In fact, the first two radio stations I worked at, I was on the air. My real legal name is actually Christopher Todd Wright. And I was on the radio as Chris Wright, my real name. But when I took a job at KHQ Radio based in Charlevoix, which is kind of a big traverse city. There's a huge top 40 powerhouse. And there was a guy working at a competing radio station, my time slot in the evening. And his actual on-air name was Wright Wilson. His first name was Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, and his last name was Wilson. And my boss, Tim Moore, said, just out of professional courtesy towards this guy, would you consider changing your name? And guys do that in radio all the time, obviously, in the entertainment world. And I said, no, that's cool. And I came up with Christopher Knight because it sounded kind of cool, I thought. And I didn't even think about it at the time. And I started getting calls, on the radio, and people were like, "Hey, are you that guy, Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch?" And because that's who that was. And I'd be like, "Yeah, don't say anything. I'm up here just trying to get away." So, but yeah, you're right. Actually, I was in radio, and Christopher Knight. So the first books that I wrote that were adult fiction, St. Helene, Ferocity, and the Laurentian Channel, those were published as novels by Christopher Knight.
Okay. So where did you get Johnathan Rand from?
I wanted to come up with something that was completely different from Christopher Knight, because I knew that the books that I was going to write for kids would be so very, very different. The books I planned for kids weren't going to be, they're for kids. You're not going to have serial killers or anything like that. At least I wasn't right. You anyway. So I wanted something, a completely different identity. And I was just jotting down easy names to remember. And I was actually reading a book, at the time I was reading it again. I really enjoyed it, called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And so I thought, okay, Rand is a really easy name to remember. And then one of the protagonists, the hero of the novel, his name is John Galt. And so I just took John Rand, and I kind of fumbled around with that one and a couple of others over the next week or two. And then I added that Johnathan, and I thought, Johnathan Rand. I just like the way that kind of flowed, and I practiced a signature, and I didn't really think too much about it after that, and was like, okay, Johnathan Rand it is, and we're off.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So where did your famous glasses come from? I've got a story there.
I was in Decatur, Georgia, with my very first editor, Maureen McLaughlin, and it's just outside it's a suburb of Atlanta, and we were walking. I can't remember what our conversation was, but there was a street vendor selling these 3D holographic glasses, and I saw those for $10. I'm like, I have to have these. These are just the coolest things ever. And I got them home, and I showed them to my wife, and she's like looking at me like, what did you buy these for? Now these were before I'd written anything in the Michigan Chillers or the American Chillers, and so they just went into a drawer. And it was early 2000, probably late March, maybe April of the year 2000, when a teacher friend of ours, Sarah Bonnet, called. And she said, hey, all the kids at the school here, and local elementary school, they're all, reading your book, Mayhem on Mackinac Island. Would you come and talk to them? And I was like, well, yeah, but what do you want me to say to them? And she said, oh, it doesn't matter. Just come in, and they'll just love, you can answer questions. And So, and I remember those glasses, and I had them. I just put them in a drawer in the kitchen, and I pulled them out, and I thought, oh, these would be cool. I bet the kids will, really enjoy these and have some fun with it. And they did. It was just the coolest thing. When I walked in, I thought it was going to be just the classroom, but it was the entire school. So I walked into this gymnasium with these kids, and I had these glasses on, and you could just see the impact. All these kids are like, oh, it was just this sea of kids taken aback, and I was like, this is cool. And from that day forward, they really kind of became my trademark.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I think we're lagging out a little bit. Okay, there we go. We're back. So, going to my next question, I kind of just wanted to talk about challenges that you faced as your writing career developed, things that kind of made you question it, and how did you overcome them?
Boy, that's I could have the next couple of hours answering that one. That would be a lengthy one. But I think early on, I really became disillusioned with the publishing industry. And when I was picked up by a publisher, and when I started watching what goes on behind the scenes, now the publisher that picked me up, I'm not speaking exclusively about them. I had really nothing derogatory that happened with them. But what that caused me was to start looking at the publishing world a little bit more, being that I was going to have this published book out there. And I really didn't like what I saw going on in this publishing world, which I quickly ascertained at that point that this is really just an offshoot of the entertainment industry. And I've said it before that I think it's as bad or worse than the music industry. And I didn't want to wind up like that. My background was marketing, and I would look at some of these guys and some of these people, and I think, you guys are a bunch of buffoons. And I really did. Right or wrong, that's what I thought. That's exactly what went through my head. And I thought, I can do this better than these people. And, so I did. I said, okay. And this was, so my books were self-published from the beginning, even though I had one that was kind of going through the pipeline that was going to be published. I thought, okay, I'm going to start doing this on my own. The first book that came out was Saint Helene. It came out as an audiobook, and I had really no way to market this except, kind of word of mouth type thing. And I thought, well, I've got to figure out a way, to get this in the hands of people. So what my wife and I started doing, think about where we live. I'm in northern Michigan, northern lower Michigan. I'm 30 minutes directly south of the Mackinac Bridge. It's a huge tourist industry, and rightly so. It's, it's beautiful. It's just, there's forests and lakes and rivers. And so people come from all over the country, even all over the world, but they do not come here to necessarily go to a bookstore. And I thought, what can I do? Well, it occurred to me that everybody that comes here, they have to eat, they have to sleep, and they have to put gas in their vehicles. So what my wife and I did, we went across northern Michigan to gas stations, restaurants, and hotels. And I talked to the manager, and I'd say, hey, I got this. I was like little Abner all the way. It was just this, going around doing this and so new and green about it. But I was excited about it. And I would take these and I would go to the manager and say, hey, I got this great audiobook. I'd like you to sell it. And they would, most cases, they would say, well, we don't sell books or audiobooks. And I said, that's exactly why I would like to have these available at your store, because they'd be unique and different.
Right.
And then they would say something like, well, we don't have any money for that right now. So I said, okay, fine. I'll tell you what, I don't want any money right now. Let's put 5 of them on the counter. And, if you sell any, you get this much, I get this much. I'll call you in a week or two. And, if it's not working out, I'll just come and pick them up, and I'll give you one for free, just to say thank you. And it worked. I started, I started getting the first phone call was from a gas station. This guy called me and he said, hey, we ran out of your book. And I was like, oh, cool. So I brought him some more, and that kind of, spearheaded and went from there. So it was a really, there was a huge learning curve on that. And I would take it to bookstores, and the first bookstore that I took it to, they said, "Where's your ISBN?" And I was like, "ISBN? What's an ISBN?" And she said, "Well, your ISBN number." And I was like, I had no idea what, I mean, I was familiar with the barcode, but I didn't know what ISBN was, or,
Right.
and so that's, a lot of things like that, just relatively, I want to say, very amateurish mistakes, and challenges that came my way. But if there's anything that I think that really helped me a lot, was that I knew that the key to my success was also my failures. And I knew that, and I wasn't afraid of failing. I never looked at something and said, oh, that didn't work. That's terrible. Oh my gosh, that's awful. It's like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Or let's try this, or let's try this. You see, when I started, I wanted to write books for adults. I was writing adult fiction. And then all of a sudden, the Michigan Chillers, really, when they first came out, they just, I don't want to say exploded and became an overnight sensation, but really that's what it seemed like. It just was something that just grew extremely quickly. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now with this? Because I'm working on these adult novels. I'm still doing radio commercials. Now I'm going to schools and speaking to kids about these books. I would have to take my entire computer. I would essentially have to take my recording studio with me, because I still had a job writing and producing radio commercials. And I would have to take, we didn't have flat screen monitors in the year 2000. We had these big, gigantic, monitors like that, it was like carrying in a 20-gallon fish aquarium with the water into a hotel. And I'd have to put all that stuff together and piece it all together in a hotel, because I might have a commercial that's going to be on the radio in Chicago at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's like 4:30. So there were a lot of things like that. But through it all, I always looked at the whole thing and thought, there really isn't anything I won't do, including make mistakes and fix them. And I think there's a lot of, that's an attitude I think you have to have if you're an entrepreneur, if you want to be a success with everything. A lot of times those failures do build up and you do get frustrated. And, sometimes it is challenging, because, you go to bed at night and nothing went right that day, nothing went right. Everything fell apart. And I'm 57 years old, or almost 57. And I still have days like that. I still get frustrated at the end of the day. But the thing that I have learned is that tomorrow really is a new day. And I really have got into the mindset that I can wake up the next day. I know that if I get a good night's sleep, I can wake up the next day, think about these things, and the problems that I face really aren't as bad as they were yesterday, the day before. And with a clear head and a little bit more of a calm demeanor, I can face these challenges. I'm not facing any challenges in fact, a lot of people they've got a heck of a lot worse than I do. And I tell myself that constantly, especially when I'm, berating myself for either something that I did that was stupid, or, something that didn't go my way, and it's like, I really don't have it all that bad. I really have no complaints. And that's a skill that, I can still work at and getting better every day.
Yeah, it's always good to have a positive outlook.
So that kind of leads into what does success look like to you? Was there ever a point where, I made it kind of thing?
No, and there never has been, and I'm not even sure if there ever will be. There's a lot of those little victories. I really do. I tend to pace myself a little bit better as I get older, which probably wasn't the case even 20 years ago when the Michigan Chillers came out. It's like I really wanted things to happen fast. And, and they didn't happen that way. And I figured out after a while that, that's just not the way, things work. But there never really was a time where I ever thought, I sat back and went, I have arrived. I'm always working on different projects. I'm always doing exciting things. And for me, success is not looking at the bottom line of your bank account every month. It's an important thing to look at. It's a barometer. It's a great barometer. But I look at it as a gauge, and some days it's nowhere near what I think it should be. Others I'm pleasantly surprised. But for me, my gauge of success is that I'm really doing what I love to do, and I like being, I guess I'd hesitate to say that I am my own boss, because that's not really true. I've got bosses all across the country, even around the world, and they're like in 3rd grade or 4th grade. These are the people that I answer to, and I mean that very seriously. These are my bosses. These are the ones that are reading my books. These and their parents. These are the kids that the parents are buying these books for these kids. They're my customers. They're my bosses, and I want to do something that's going to be relevant to them. I want them to be I want it to be a fair exchange. I want a kid to pick up a book and one of mine, and I want a parent to look at this and go, $5, $6, $7. This is valuable. My son or my daughter is reading this, and this is a fair exchange for my hard-earned money. And to me, that is success. When I see a kid reading my book, I might be somewhere. Not too long ago, I was I was walking into a supermarket downstate, and there was a kid sitting in the back of a car reading one of my books. I looked over and I saw the cover of my book, and this kid's in the back of the car. And I thought, that's success right there. I didn't go over and pound on the window or anything, but it was just like, that was, I walked away with a big smile. That was the coolest thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess, kind of a more laid back question. Which book was your favorite one to write?
It's a tough question, because each one is memorable in its own right. Some of the more recent favorites are the one I just showed you, this one, Drummond Island Dogman, because the whole Michigan Dogman theme, and plus it's kind of a scary book. So that was a fun one to write. There's a new series. I started a series a couple of years ago called Dollar Store Danny, which are for kids that are really beginning reading. They're getting out of picture books, or and they're not quite ready for, like the Freddie Nortner series that I write. They're certainly not really ready for American Chillers or Michigan Chillers. Those are a lot of fun to write, because I'm writing about things that are just pure imagination, things that I thought of when I was that age. I wrote a novel. Here it is. I wrote a novel years ago for adults called Bestseller, it's about a serial killer that stalks a New York literary agent while she's on vacation in the Upper Peninsula. And that was just a ton of fun to write. It was just really intense writing for a short period of time while I just got it all out. So that one was a fun one. In the American Chillers series, all the dinosaur books, Savage Dinosaurs of South Dakota, Wicked Velociraptors of West Virginia. There's another book, series called Nightmare Nation, which is similar to the American Chillers and Michigan Chillers. The only difference is I've got 50 planned like the American Chillers, but they're based on different legends. They're actual things. Like the first book, I don't think I've got that. Oh yeah, I do. The first book is called Village of the Dolls. It's based in Michigan, and it's about an actual place near Fairview where somebody's been putting these dolls out by the side of the highway for like 30 years. It's the creepiest thing. Don't go there. Yeah, it's really weird. So the story is fictional, obviously, but it's based on something that's real. And that was a fun book to write. I kind of creeped myself out when I wrote that.
Yeah.
So if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would probably say stop worrying. There really isn't that. There's no need to take these stresses and these anxieties as hard as I did. And even sometimes still today, I still have to tell myself that that's, that this is not important. These stress can really be a good thing. There's a book, or I'm sorry, not a book, but a movie that I watched years ago. It was called My Dinner with Andre. It's very cool movie. It's just about these two guys sitting that's all it is. It's like two guys sitting at this restaurant talking. And Andre in this movie has this great quote, and I just wrote it down and I put it on the door of my cabin. And it says, comfort can lead you into a dangerous tranquility. And I think that's so true because, you know, to me, that's my enemy is drill, doing the same thing over and over again. I can't do that. And my father-in-law made a great career. He worked for General Motors. He did the same thing for his entire life, and he loved it. He worked on cars. The guy could work on cars. He could work on any motor, any engine, and get the thing running. But when he was working for General Motors, it was pretty much the same thing. And he really enjoyed that. For me, that would kill me. I could never do that. And that's why I like writing books so much, is that I get to do something, you know, something different every single day. But I think that's, going back to your question, I think that's the piece of advice that I would give myself. And I would even tell kids that are in their teenage years, is that, you know, these stresses aren't that serious. They're important, but they're not serious. When you go to the gym, you know, you go specifically to work out, and you're putting stress on a particular muscle, you know, if you're, and that's how it's going to grow. If you're a bodybuilder, you've got to tax that muscle. You've got to add stress to that muscle, but there's more to it than just that. You've got to take the time to recover, and you've got to, you know, and the same thing goes with your mental attitude, and your emotional state and your intellectual state. You know, if you let that stress build up, you know, like a balloon, you're just filling that balloon again and again and again, and you don't have a way to let that out, you know, you're going to be in trouble, because pretty soon that balloon is going to pop. And for me, as somebody who writes as much as I do, I write in a journal. I write in a journal every day, and it's no holds barred. I write whatever I want. Nobody's going to read it. Nobody will ever read it. And I let all the air out of that balloon usually I would say, I mean, I'm pretty consistent about it on a daily basis. If I'm working on another writing project, I might not write in a day, but mostly I do write in it every day. And I'll write about anything anything that I'm upset about, anything that I'm excited about, problems in the world, my favorite song, anything of that sort. It all comes out in my journal. And I noticed that when I started doing that back in 2013, things really changed in my life. You know, I really felt that it had a calming effect on my overall demeanor throughout the day. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it sure felt good. And I still continue the practice to this day.
Awesome. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you for coming on today, Johnathan. It was awesome to have you.
I'm a big fan.
Hey, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really nice to meet you. And I'm sure we'll talk further. All
right. Sounds great, guys. Yeah, great.
All right.
Have a good one.
Later,
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Thank you to everybody who stopped in to watch. We appreciate it.
Just kidding. I'm not going to know.
So thank you to everybody. I guess we'll end it here. And this is going live, so we recorded it as well. So it's live now, and then we're also posting it on YouTube on Monday.
So if you missed any piece of it, check there. Make sure to like and subscribe. We are, so I guess what's today? Wednesday.
Yeah.
So Wednesday, so a few days ago, we're posting the winner of the giveaway.
Yes. So thank you guys for tuning in today. We appreciate it. See you guys later.
Happy Wednesday.